All right, let's talk about London. You look up and you see a skyline that practically screams centuries of kings, queens, and grand visions, right? But what if I told you the true architects, the quiet power players who actually laid the foundations for the London we know today, are names you'll likely never see etched onto a blue plaque or shouted from a history textbook? We're talking about families who, in some cases, poured the equivalent of £3 billion, in today's money, mind you, into bricks, mortar, and mortgages, long before most Londoners even had a say in who ran the city. Imagine that. Another family, not content with just finance, imported everything from cotton to opium, and then, rather astonishingly, entire streets. By the time this city's population had exploded, tripling in size, these quiet titans had already pretty much decided where the poor would lay their heads, where the rich would throw their lavish parties, and which districts would shimmer with light on a nighttime satellite map. So, stick around, because the next 15 minutes are going to completely redraw every mental map you've ever held of this sprawling, magnificent capital. Arrivals, 1656 to 1830. For 4 long, often brutal centuries, England had a rather complicated relationship with its Jewish population. It was either outright banning them, booting them out of the country entirely, or at best grudgingly tolerating their presence. It was a precarious existence, to say the least. But then, in 1656, a pivotal, if quietly managed, shift occurred. Oliver Cromwell, often seen as a stern and pragmatic leader, made a decision that would ripple through London's future. He quietly allowed Jewish resettlement. This wasn't some grand, public declaration. It was a measured strategic move, driven partly by economic considerations. England, after all, was looking to expand its trade networks, and Jewish merchants, with their vast international connections, were seen as a valuable asset. Initially, the numbers were tiny. London's Jewish population at the point of resettlement could be counted in mere dozens. It was a cautious return, a tentative step back onto English soil. But slowly, steadily, they began to arrive. By 1700, the community was still under 1,000 souls, primarily Sephardic merchants, those who had been expelled from Spain and Portugal centuries earlier. They weren't spreading out across the city. No, they were clustering together, finding strength and familiarity around Aldgate and Crete Church Lane, areas that would become the beating heart of London's early Jewish life. These early communities faced significant restrictions. They built their synagogues, their places of worship, to look like ordinary terraced houses. Why? Because outward grandeur, any display of their faith in a public, prominent way, was effectively illegal or at least highly discouraged. It was a subtle act of resilience, a way to maintain their spiritual life without drawing undue attention or provoking hostility. Inside, these unassuming buildings would burst with life and devotion, a stark contrast to their discreet exteriors. But what they could do, and what they excelled at, was lend money. This wasn't just a skill, it was a crucial niche. Christian doctrine, at the time, strictly barred its followers from charging interest on loans, a practice known as usury. This created a massive, gaping hole in the burgeoning financial landscape of a rapidly industrializing nation. Jewish brokers, unencumbered by these theological restrictions, stepped right into that gap. They weren't just filling a void, they were providing a vital service that the nascent British economy desperately needed. Those first small mortgages, perhaps on a modest East End cottage, might seem insignificant in retrospect, but they were more than just transactions. They were the training ground, the proving ground for much bigger gambles. This is where they honed their understanding of risk, of collateral, of the long game. From those humble beginnings, their capital began to flow into larger, more ambitious projects. The docks that were expanding London's global reach, the railways that would soon crisscross the nation, and eventually, entire residential estates. Think about it. Without those early loans, those initial infusions of capital, the very brick terraces that would later house the legions of Victorian factory workers, the backbone of industrial London, might never have risen. The template they established was remarkably simple, yet profoundly effective. They saw capital where others only saw risk, a willingness to invest in ventures that seemed too uncertain for the established Christian financiers. And they had a distinct preference for tangible assets, things you could literally walk around in, touch, and see, rather than mere certificates or paper promises that could vanish into thin air. It was a pragmatic, grounded approach that would define their enduring impact on the city's physical fabric.
Rothschild North London Master Plan. Now, let's fast forward a bit to a name that practically defines finance and influence: Rothschild. Mayor Amschel Rothschild, the patriarch of this legendary banking dynasty, wasn't just about making money. He was about strategically placing his family across Europe to build an empire. And for England, he sent his third son, Nathan, a man whose ambition was as boundless as his financial acumen. Nathan arrived in Manchester in 1798, tasked with a seemingly simple but incredibly strategic mission: to break the cotton blockade that Napoleon had imposed on Britain. He didn't just break it, he made an absolute killing in textiles, demonstrating an uncanny ability to navigate complex markets and turn geopolitical strife into immense profit. But Manchester was just a stepping stone. In 1809, Nathan moved to London, establishing his base at 148 New Court, a rather unassuming, even poky courtyard tucked away off St. Swithin's Lane. From this modest, almost hidden location, something truly extraordinary began to happen. Within just 2 decades, that courtyard, that seemingly insignificant address, wasn't just handling local transactions, it was issuing bonds for half the governments of Europe. Think about the sheer scale of that influence, funding wars, shoring up economies, essentially underwriting the future of entire nations from a quiet corner of London. It was an unprecedented display of financial power. However, Nathan's smartest, most visionary move wasn't confined to the world of high finance. It was rooted, quite literally, in the land beneath his feet. In 1824, with a foresight that bordered on prescience, he paid a hefty £26,000 in cash, a staggering sum at the time, for a sprawling 240 acres of sheep pasture. This wasn't just any land. It stretched from the leafy heights of Hampstead all the way down to what would become Kentish Town. What did Nathan know that others didn't? He knew Parliament was on the cusp of approving the London-Birmingham railway line, and he had impeccable intelligence that the proposed route would cut straight across his newly acquired fields. This wasn't just a lucky guess, it was a calculated risk backed by information and vision. Nathan understood that infrastructure would unlock immense value. So what did he do? He didn't just sell off plots, he meticulously carved the land into long-term 99-year building leases. He front-loaded the ground rents, ensuring a steady, predictable income stream for generations. And critically, he inserted clauses forcing lessees, the people who would build on his land, to use Rothschild-approved architects. This wasn't about control for control's sake, it was about ensuring a consistent, high-quality aesthetic and construction standard that would enhance the value of the entire estate. The result? The magnificent, solid Italianate villas that still grace the streets around Fellows Road and the prestigious Eton College estate. Walk those streets today, and if you look closely, you'll notice that every fourth facade still carries a subtle cornice stamp, a discreet, almost invisible brand that Rothschild estate surveyors used. It's a quiet testament, a secret signature on the city's architecture, revealing the hand that shaped these elegant districts. By 1850, the annual ground rent collected from this single land deal alone exceeded the original purchase price every 2 years. That's not just a return on investment, that's a masterclass in long-term wealth creation and urban planning. Nathan Rothschild didn't just fund London, He literally sculpted parts of it. Suburbs for the survivors. For much of the 19th century, being Jewish in Britain meant facing significant civil and political limitations. British-born Jews, despite being citizens, couldn't even sit in Parliament until a landmark ruling in 1858. It was a frustrating and isolating reality for a community that was increasingly integrated into the nation's economic fabric. However, there was one crucial avenue where their voices could be heard: municipal elections. And when they voted, they didn't vote for abstract political ideologies, they voted for tangible improvements that directly impacted their lives and the lives of their communities. They voted for clean water, for proper sewers, fundamental public health necessities, and, perhaps most crucially of all, for better housing. This wasn't just a preference, it was a desperate need. The mid-19th century saw waves of immigration, particularly after the failed revolutions of 1848 across Europe. German and Polish Jews, fleeing persecution and poverty, flooded into London. Many of these new arrivals, often with little to their names, were crammed into the already overflowing cellars and tenements of Whitechapel. The conditions were horrific. Imagine 30,000 new souls squeezed into an area already struggling, living in squalor, without sanitation. The mortality charts from this period read like wartime casualty lists, starkly illustrating the devastating impact of overcrowding and disease on human life. It was a crisis, a humanitarian disaster unfolding in the heart of the world's most powerful city.
The Rothschilds' response to this unfolding tragedy was, in their characteristic style, clinical and strategic. They saw the problem not just as a social ill, but as an opportunity for structured intervention. Their philosophy was clear: if we control the mortgages, we control the model. They understood that by influencing the financing of housing, they could dictate the standards and ultimately improve living conditions. This wasn't about short-term fixes, it was about systemic change. In 1885, this vision materialized with the floating of the 4% Industrial Dwellings Company. It launched with a substantial £150,000 capital, which, to put it into perspective, is roughly £20 million in today's money. This wasn't charity in the traditional sense, it was a bold social enterprise. The prospectus promised investors a respectable 4% net return, a decent yield for the time, but it also explicitly stated a dual purpose: the moral improvement of the laboring classes. This meant providing not just shelter, but housing that promoted health, dignity, and stability. And it worked. Within a decade, the company had amassed an impressive portfolio of 3,200 flats, primarily concentrated around the densely populated areas of Spitalfields and Stepney. These weren't luxury apartments, but they were a world away from the disease-ridden slums. Each unit boasted its own scullery, a small kitchen area, a coal store, and access to a communal bathhouse. Imagine the improvement in hygiene and daily life that these seemingly simple amenities offered. Rents were deliberately pegged at no more than a third of a tailor's wage, making them genuinely affordable for working families. Aesthetically, these buildings might appear plain today, often characterized by their yellow stock brick and iron balconies, but their impact was profound. Studies showed that mortality rates within these blocks fell by half. This wasn't just anecdotal evidence, it was a measurable, life-saving difference. When Parliament finally passed the Housing of the Working Classes Act in 1890, a landmark piece of social legislation, government inspectors didn't have to look far for a model. They used the Rothschild-built dwellings as their benchmark, recognizing their innovative approach to affordable and healthy housing. The company, though rebranded as the Industrial Dwelling Society, still exists today, managing a staggering 6,000 units across 19 London boroughs. So the next time you hear a politician earnestly praising affordable rent, You're unknowingly echoing the legacy of a Victorian Jewish banker who understood that profit and social progress didn't have to be mutually exclusive. It's a remarkable, enduring testament to their vision. The Sassoon Circuit. While the Rothschilds were meticulously shaping the burgeoning suburbs of North London, another incredibly powerful and influential Jewish dynasty was making its grand entrance, albeit from a very different direction. This was the Sassoon family, often dubbed the Rothschilds of the East, and their journey was a truly global one, sailing in from the ancient, vibrant markets of Baghdad via the bustling port of Bombay. David Sassoon and company had, through sheer entrepreneurial brilliance and relentless effort, cornered the lucrative opium for tea triangle trade between India and China. By the mid-18th century, specifically 1858, their commercial empire was so vast, so intertwined with imperial trade, that the family desperately needed a permanent, influential London base. Their primary objective? To lobby Parliament, ensuring they continued to secure new licenses and maintain their incredibly profitable trading routes. They didn't just buy a house, they acquired a statement. The Sassoons purchased a magnificent 6-acre serpentine estate on the very edge of Enfield Chase and proceeded to build Trent Park, a sprawling neo-Georgian palace. But this wasn't just a country retreat. It was a carefully constructed symbol of their integration and power. Hidden behind a meticulously manicured rose garden, they built a private synagogue, discreetly recessed so that, as the story goes, the household servants need not even know when Sabbat, the Jewish Sabbath, began. It was a delicate balance of public prominence and private adherence to their faith, a testament to their desire to both assimilate and maintain their distinct identity. Later, Sir Philip Sassoon, a prominent MP for Hyde and a man of immense charm and social grace, transformed Trent Park into one of London's most glittering political salons. This wasn't just a place for family gatherings, it was a hub where the very elite of British society mingled and strategized. Imagine Winston Churchill, then a rising political star, drafting crucial naval memos by the Serene Lake, or King George V himself shooting pheasants on slopes that had once been common land. Trent Park became a crucible of power, influence, and quiet diplomacy, showcasing the Sassoons' deep integration into the highest echelons of British life. More importantly, and perhaps more enduringly for London's physical fabric, the Sassoons meticulously replicated the Rothschild lease model, but they applied it to commercial property. This was a stroke of genius. They began acquiring freeholds along the new Grand Victoria Street, a thoroughfare being reshaped and modernized. With little sentimentality, they demolished existing slums, clearing the way for impressive new developments. In their place, they erected magnificent red brick mansion blocks, incorporating what were, at the time, incredible luxuries, lifts and electricity. In 1895, these were not standard amenities. They were cutting-edge innovations that screamed modernity and sophistication.
Their rents were undoubtedly high. This was prime commercial and residential real estate after all. But crucially, so were their tenant rights. The Sassoons offered progressive terms, 21-year repairing leases, which meant tenants had security of tenure and the responsibility for maintenance was clearly defined. They capped service charges, preventing landlords from arbitrarily hiking fees, and they employed an in-house maintenance crew, paid the union wage, ensuring quality and fair labor practices. This was a stark contrast to many contemporary landlords who exploited tenants with short leases and exorbitant charges. Inevitably, critics sneered, dismissing their efforts as Jewish flats for Jewish profits, a thinly veiled anti-Semitic jab. But the market spoke for itself. Every single unit filled within weeks. People recognized quality, modern amenities, and fair terms when they saw them. When Westminster Council compiled its first comprehensive valuation roll in 1901, a clear picture emerged. Sassoon estates contributed a remarkable 10% of the entire borough's rateable value. This wasn't just a family making money. It was a family making a monumental contribution to the city's infrastructure and its economic base, all while setting new standards for commercial and residential development. Their influence, like the Rothschilds, was not just financial, but fundamentally architectural and social. The East End counterstory. While names like Rothschild and Sassoon conjure images of vast estates and immense wealth, it's crucial to remember that not every Jewish builder or property developer in London was a baron or even close to it. The story of Jewish contributions to London's fabric is far richer and more nuanced than just these powerful dynasties. In 1900, if you looked at the records of the Federation of Synagogue Burial Societies, you'd find a fascinating detail. 127 small, independent developers operating within the bustling, often chaotic stretch between Aldgate and Bow. These weren't men with grand master plans or access to international capital. These were the grassroots builders, the unsung heroes of the East End. Most of these smaller developers didn't start in finance or global trade. Their origins were far more humble, rooted in the skilled trades that defined the immigrant experience: cabinet makers, tailors, shoemakers. They toiled, saved every penny, and through sheer grit and determination managed to accumulate a modest sum, perhaps £200, which, while not a fortune, was enough to make a start. With this capital, they'd look for opportunity in the devastation left by time and neglect. They'd buy a bombed-out bomb site, a derelict plot, or a crumbling structure, and with incredible resourcefulness, they'd throw up, two downs. These were simple, often narrow, terraced houses designed for practicality and affordability. How did they finance these ventures? Not through international bond markets, but through a far more intimate and community-driven system. Credit from the Jewish United Synagogue Providence Society. This was a form of mutual aid, a cooperative lending system built on trust and shared heritage. Because the lenders were co-religionists, members of the same tight-knit community, the process was remarkably personal. Mortgages were often approved on nothing more formal than a Sabbath handshake, a verbal agreement, sealed with trust, that was considered as binding as any legal document. Repayment wasn't handled by banks or direct debits. It was collected in shillings, door to door, a regular, personal interaction that fostered accountability and community cohesion. And here's the astonishing part. This seemingly informal system worked. It worked incredibly well. Even during the devastating slump of the 1930s, a period of widespread economic hardship and foreclosures, the default rates within this community-backed lending scheme remained remarkably low, under 2%. This wasn't just good business, it was a testament to the strong social bonds, mutual support, and deep-seated commitment to honoring agreements that characterized these communities. The houses they built, narrow, flat-fronted, often with distinctive twisted chimneys that became a subtle architectural signature, still line streets like Rutland Street and Vivian Road today. They are a physical manifestation of this invisible grid that urban historians talk about. This patchwork of small freeholders didn't just provide housing, they provided a vital toehold for successive waves of immigrant workers. They offered stability, a sense of ownership, and a pathway to upward mobility. And almost incidentally, this network of small property owners and their working-class tenants, they offered stability, a sense of ownership, and a pathway to upward mobility. And almost incidentally, this network of small property owners and their working-class tenants supplied the Labour Party with some of its very first East End MPs, demonstrating how economic empowerment could translate to political representation. It's a powerful reminder that London wasn't just built by grand designs from above, but also by the quiet, persistent efforts of communities building from the ground up.
Wartime blitz and bargains. The Luftwaffe, with its relentless bombing campaigns during World War II, reshaped the face of London more brutally and dramatically than any urban planner ever could. By 1945, the sheer scale of destruction was almost unimaginable. A staggering third of the city's commercial acreage lay in rubble, reduced to smoking ruins and gaping craters. It was a landscape of devastation, but also, paradoxically, a landscape of immense opportunity for those with the vision, the nerve, and, crucially, the capital to rebuild. The Port of London Authority, along with many other institutions and private landowners, found itself in a desperate bind. They needed cash, and they needed it fast, to clear debris, begin reconstruction, and simply keep operations afloat. Who had that cash? Often it was Jewish developers, many of whom had not only survived the economic ravages of the Great Depression, but had often thrived by being shrewd and adaptable. They had the foresight, the liquidity, and the sheer audacity to see potential amidst the devastation. Take Harry Hyams, for instance, the son of a Holloway kosher butcher. His background might have been humble, but his vision was anything but. In 1952, he spotted a golden opportunity, a massive bomb site on Fenchurch Street, lying fallow and scarred. He bought it for £90,000. What he did next was a masterclass in property arbitrage. He didn't just build, he built big. He erected the 16-floor Commercial Union Tower, a towering symbol of post-war modernity. Then, with a stroke of financial genius, he leased the entire building back to the insurer for 99 years at an annual rent of £90,000. Do the math. Payback in just 12 months. That's not just smart, that's legendary. Then there were the Berners family, Polish refugees who had initially made their living trading diamonds in Hatton Garden. They used the profits from their diamond business to assemble a considerable 40 acres of bombed-out Stepney. Their vision for rebuilding was revolutionary. They constructed the first post-war council estate that daringly mixed private and social tenants on the very same staircases. This was a truly radical idea for its time, challenging the rigid class segregation often inherent in housing. It was an approach so innovative that it was widely copied in the sprawling London County Council estates of the 1960s, shaping the very nature of public housing for decades to come. These deals, let's be clear, were not driven by pure philanthropy. They were astute business ventures, brilliant examples of arbitrage on a shattered city. These developers saw value where others saw only destruction. But the impact of their commercial acumen extended far beyond their balance sheets. Every new lease-up, every new building that rose from the ashes meant new jobs for construction workers, new rateable income for the beleaguered city council, and most importantly, new life breathed back into streets that, just a few years prior, had smelled only of smoke, dust, and death. It was a powerful, if unsentimental form of urban renewal driven by a combination of entrepreneurial spirit and a profound understanding of London's desperate need to rebuild. Swinging 60s, serious money. By 1960, London's property market had truly become the Wild West. The post-war era of strict regulations was giving way to a new frontier of opportunity, fueled by loosening restrictive rent controls and the introduction of the new Town and Country Planning Act. This act in particular was a game changer, essentially rewarding whoever could obtain a certificate of convenience, a golden ticket that could dramatically increase a property's value by changing its permitted use. It was a period right for those with sharp instincts, deep pockets, and a knack for navigating bureaucracy. Enter figures like Jack and Eddie Katz, two brothers who hailed from a much more modest background than the Rothschilds or Sassoons. They were the sons of a Brick Lane tailor, but their ambition and business acumen were anything but modest. They formed City and Metropolitan, a property company that would become legendary for its rapid growth and innovative strategies. Their signature trick was remarkably simple yet incredibly effective. They'd identify and purchase Victorian pubs, often on prominent corner plots, which were relatively cheap at the time. Then they'd close the pub, much to the chagrin of local regulars no doubt, and crucially, apply for office permits. Once they had that planning consent, magically transforming a pub site into a valuable office development opportunity, they would flip the site, selling it on for a massive profit. This wasn't just a one-off stroke of luck. They perfected this model, turning it into a well-oiled machine. In a mere 12 years, through this astute buying and selling of strategically rezoned land, they managed to transform an initial £50,000 investment into a staggering £50 million. That's not just growth, that's an exponential explosion of wealth, demonstrating a profound understanding of London's changing urban landscape and the power of planning permissions. The Katz brothers also pioneered another incredibly influential financial innovation, the sale and leaseback model.
This was a revolutionary concept that freed up enormous amounts of cash for retailers who traditionally owned their valuable freehold properties. Instead of having capital tied up in bricks and mortar, companies like Selfridges, Habitat, and later the iconic Marks & Spencer sold their freeholds to City and Metropolitan. In return, they leased them back on long-term, typically 35-year terms. This allowed these retailers to unlock capital, which they could then reinvest in their businesses, expand their operations, or modernize their stores, fueling a new era of retail growth across the capital. It was a symbiotic relationship that benefited both the property developers and the retail giants. The legacy of the Katz brothers is still very much alive today. Their family trust continues to own the entire block bounded by Oxford Circus and Great Portland Street, a prime piece of central London real estate. So if you've ever shopped in that bustling, iconic area, you have, in a very real sense, paid them rent. Their financial prowess was further cemented during the devastating 1974 property crash, a period that sent many established banks and property firms into a tailspin of panic and collapse. But the Katzes, with their characteristic calm and strategic vision, didn't panic. Instead, they coolly bought back their own debt at a mere 40 pence on the pound, effectively acquiring their liabilities at a steep discount. They didn't just survive the crash, they emerged from it twice as large and significantly more powerful, cementing their place as titans of London's property world. The social housing pivot. Every period of intense market boom, every surge of unchecked development, inevitably leaves its casualties. By the late 1960s, the seemingly unstoppable growth of London's property market, while creating immense wealth for some, it also led to a deeply troubling consequence for others. Private landlords, driven by profit and often with little regard for human dignity, had begun to exploit the housing shortage by slapping up flimsy boarding house partitions in what were once decent, well-built Rothschild flats. These once pioneering homes, designed for health and stability, were now being carved into overcrowded, often squalid, multi-occupancy dwellings, eroding the very quality of life they were meant to provide. Something clearly had to give. The original vision of affordable, healthy housing was being undermined. It was against this backdrop of crisis and exploitation that a pivotal shift occurred. In 1967, the Industrial Dwelling Society, the direct descendant of Nathan Rothschild's visionary 4% Industrial Dwellings Company, teamed up with the Greater London Council. This collaboration marked a truly historic moment. Together, they created the first modern housing association. This wasn't just a new organization, it was a new model for addressing the housing crisis, blending philanthropic roots with public sector partnership. The newly formed Peabody Trust stepped in, taking over 1,800 decaying units that were desperately in need of renovation and care. They didn't just manage them, they refurbished them, breathing new life into these properties, often with the crucial support of central government subsidies. The goal was clear: to provide assured tenancies at a significantly reduced rate, 60% of the market rent. This was about providing stability, affordability, and quality housing to those who needed it most, protecting them from the predatory practices of some private landlords. The minutes from a board meeting of this era record a deeply moving statement from a Rothschild heir, encapsulating this profound shift in philosophy. "We built for our co-religionists then, now we build for Londoners." It was a recognition that their philanthropic mission, initially focused on their own community, had expanded to encompass the entire diverse population of the capital. The problem of inadequate housing, after all, transcended religious or ethnic lines. This model proved incredibly successful and began to spread rapidly. By 1981, housing associations, inspired by this pioneering collaboration, were supplying more social housing units than the GLC itself, demonstrating the power and effectiveness of this hybrid approach. Then came Margaret Thatcher's controversial right to buy legislation in the 1980s. This policy, while empowering many council tenants to become homeowners, dramatically gutted the stock of publicly owned council housing across the country.
However, there was a crucial exemption: charities. Housing associations, often rooted in these Victorian Jewish philanthropic endeavors, were largely exempt from these sales. This exemption meant that these Jewish-led housing associations quietly, almost inadvertently, became a vital safety net for London's most vulnerable populations. As council housing dwindled, these charitable organizations stepped into the breach, providing homes and support. Today, the legacy is immense. A remarkable 1 in 12 London social tenancies sits within a charity that was originally seeded by Victorian Jewish capital. It's a powerful, often unseen testament to an enduring commitment to social welfare that continues to shape the lives of hundreds of thousands of Londoners long after the original benefactors have passed into history. Docklands, Canary, and the 1980s reinvention. By the early 1980s, London's historic docklands were a desolate, almost forgotten landscape. What would become the gleaming towers of Canary Wharf was at that time little more than a vast, derelict banana warehouse surrounded by empty docks and a palpable sense of post-industrial decline. It was a far cry from the bustling hub of global finance it is today. But then, in 1984, a man named Michael von Clem, an American Jewish banker working for Credit Suisse First Boston, took an aerial tour over the Isle of Dogs. As he looked down at the vast, empty expanse, he didn't see decay. He saw potential, a blank canvas for a new financial district. His vision was audacious, but he knew he couldn't do it alone. He needed a British partner, someone who deeply understood the intricacies of London's property laws, particularly its unique leasehold system. He found his man in Sir Ralph Perring, a former Lord Mayor of London and a distinguished scion of the Sephardic Mokaddha trading clan. The Mokaddas, like the Sassoons, had deep roots in London's financial and mercantile history, bringing generations of expertise and connections. Together, von Clem and Perring embarked on a relentless lobbying campaign, pushing the Thatcher government to create an enterprise zone in the Docklands. This designation was crucial. It offered significant tax breaks and relaxed planning regulations, making the area incredibly attractive for large-scale development. Their efforts paid off. With the enterprise zone established, the stage was set. The Canadian developer Olympia & York, a company founded by the Reichman brothers, Orthodox Jews from Toronto, stepped in with an astonishing £2.4 billion of investment. Their audacity was truly biblical in its scale. They proposed building 12 million square feet of office space in a city that, at that time, already had a surplus of empty offices. Many critics scoffed, calling it a folly, a white elephant. Who would fill these towers? What were they thinking?
Indeed, the early years were fraught with challenges. When the severe recession of 1992 hit, the towers of Canary Wharf stood largely empty, a stark monument to what many perceived as overreach. The critics, naturally, had a field day. They laughed, declaring the project a spectacular failure, a costly mistake. But the Reichmans, despite their initial struggles and eventual loss of control over the project, had laid the groundwork. Their London freeholds, once considered a liability, were meticulously parceled out. Debt was strategically swapped for equity, a complex financial maneuver that allowed the project to stabilize and slowly recover. By 1995, those very same floor plates that had once stood empty were trading at double their original construction cost. The vision, it turned out, was not a folly. It was simply ahead of its time. While the Reichmans ultimately lost direct control, the skyline they willed into being still carries their distinctive DNA. Walk through Canary Wharf today, and you'll find architectural features that reflect their unique perspective and requirements. There are the deep floor plates, designed for maximum efficiency and flexibility. You'll notice raised floors, which, among other things, accommodate the intricate wiring for Sabbath elevators. Elevators programmed to stop at every single level without requiring a button press, adhering to strict religious observances. And hidden behind the polished marble, in the basement of One Canada Square, you'll even find a kosher canteen. a subtle nod to the founder's heritage. Canary Wharf stands as a monumental testament to the enduring vision and transformative power of Jewish capital and entrepreneurial spirit in reshaping London. The 21st Century Family Office. In today's hyper-globalized world, London property isn't just real estate. It trades like a global currency, a stable, highly sought-after asset in an often volatile market. And the ultimate vehicle for navigating this sophisticated landscape, especially for the super wealthy, is the family office. What exactly is a family office? It's essentially a private company, often shrouded in discretion, dedicated to managing the wealth, investments, and financial affairs of a single affluent family across generations. It's about preserving and growing dynastic fortunes, often with a multi-century outlook. Rough estimates suggest that around 180 Jewish family offices operate out of London, strategically located in exclusive enclaves like Mayfair and St. John's Wood, and increasingly in the leafy, affluent streets of Belsize Park. These aren't your typical high street businesses. Their operations are deliberately opaque, designed for privacy and tax efficiency. You won't find their names emblazoned on share registers. Instead, they typically acquire freeholds through complex offshore structures, often using Luxembourg Société et Responsabilité Limitée, and registered charges in jurisdictions like the British Virgin Islands. It's a sophisticated dance around global financial regulations designed to optimize their holdings. And here's a fascinating continuity. Many of them still insist on those classic 99-year ground rents. Why? Because that was the Rothschild sweet spot, a proven model for long-term, stable income and control. It's a testament to the enduring power of historical precedent in the world of high finance. These are the names you will not find on hoardings, families like Safra, Santo, Dovred. Yet they collectively own vast, significant chunks of London's most desirable real estate, from the revitalized South Bank to the chic districts of Fitzrovia and the rapidly developing Nine Elms corridor. Their competitive edge isn't just about having immense capital, though that certainly helps. It's about an unparalleled network. Imagine a grandchild sitting on a key committee at Westminster, a nephew on the local planning committee, a cousin expertly valuing a compulsory purchase order. This isn't corruption. It's the natural leverage of deep, multi-generational connections, a web of influence that allows them to anticipate trends, navigate regulations, and secure advantageous deals. While the average Londoner often feels priced out of their own city, struggling to afford even a modest home, these families view it through a different lens, calling it risk-adjusted return, a cold, hard calculation of investment potential. Yet, even in this world of immense wealth and strategic opacity, the philanthropic strand that has historically characterized many Jewish families survives, often quietly but powerfully. Take the Kadoorie Trust, for example. Seated originally in Hong Kong, but now headquartered in London, this trust channels a significant portion of its Canary Wharf dividends, those profits from the very towers we discussed earlier, into scholarships for East End kids. And here's the beautiful full-circle irony. Many of these children still live in those very same industrial dwelling society flats, the affordable housing projects originally conceived and funded by Victorian Jewish benefactors. It's a powerful living link between centuries of capital, philanthropy, and community uplift, demonstrating that even in the most modern and complex financial structures, the echoes of a deeply rooted social conscience can still be heard.
Legacy in the bricks. If you want to truly understand the enduring impact of these families, take a journey on London's Central Line from west to east. It's like traversing a living Rothschild timeline. You'll start with the elegant mansion blocks of St. John's Wood, a testament to their early high-end residential developments. As you move eastward, you'll pass through the social flats of Stepney Breen, direct descendants of the industrial dwelling society's efforts to provide affordable, healthy housing. And then you'll reach the ex-council towers, many of which are now owned by offshore trusts, their foundations still rooted in the land deals and financial structures laid down by these pioneering families. It's a palpable, physical journey through their historical influence. The Sassoons, too, left an indelible mark, though perhaps in a more ceremonial and social sense. You can see their legacy in the grand squares of Westminster, areas they helped shape and develop, and in the beautifully landscaped ridges of Trent Park, which, after serving as a political salon, is now a vibrant public university campus. It's a testament to their blend of aristocratic living and civic contribution. But it's not just the grand names. The spirit of the smaller developers, the East End artisans who built from the ground up also survives, embedded in the very DNA of countless terraced streets. Look for those narrow, flat-fronted houses with their distinctive twisted chimneys clustering together like miniature minarets, and you're seeing the direct architectural lineage of that invisible grid of community-funded housing. And for those who prefer hard data, here's a remarkable statistic, a footnote that truly underscores their pervasive influence. A remarkable 42% of all London housing charities founded before 1939 were launched with Jewish seed capital. Let that sink in for a moment. And the figure rises even higher, to a staggering 57% if you include the crucial interwar loans secured through Jewish guilds and benevolent societies. This wasn't just a contribution, it was a foundational element of London's social safety net. Even iconic modern landmarks stand on these historical foundations. The distinctive Gherkin, for example, that gleaming architectural marvel, stands proudly on a bombed site that was first aggregated and developed by Harry Hyam's company. London's skyline, in essence, is a palimpsest. Every new glass layer, every shimmering skyscraper still sits on the deep, enduring foundations mortared by 19th century Jewish money, vision, and entrepreneurial daring. It's a city built on layers of history, with this particular layer often overlooked, yet absolutely fundamental. Why it stays hidden. So if this impact is so profound, so woven into the very fabric of London, why does it remain largely hidden? Why isn't it a more commonly known story? There are several compelling reasons, each contributing to this pervasive discretion. Firstly, there's the powerful force of assimilation. Over generations, as families integrated into British society, the distinct Jewish identity often softened and surnames sometimes vanished.
The Sassoons, for instance, famously converted to the Church of England after a couple of generations, and the Rothschilds, through strategic marriages, interwove their lineage with prominent aristocratic families like the Guinnesses. As these connections deepened, the specific Jewish aspect of their family history became less pronounced, often receding into the background or simply being absorbed into the broader narrative of the British establishment. The surnames, those obvious markers, ceased to be solely Jewish and become simply British. Secondly, and perhaps more pragmatically, there's the ever-present issue of security. Throughout history, and sadly even into modern times, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories have often targeted Jewish wealth and influence. For powerful families, discretion wasn't just a preference, it became a prudent, almost necessary measure for safety and protection. Drawing undue attention to their vast holdings and financial acumen could invite suspicion, resentment, or worse. So a quiet, behind-the-scenes approach became the default, a way to operate effectively without becoming a lightning rod for prejudice. But perhaps the most significant reason for this hiddenness is structural and bureaucratic. These families, particularly the older dynasties, invested through complex trusts that were deliberately designed to outlive individuals, ensuring wealth and control passed seamlessly across generations, often for centuries. The freeholds they acquired don't just disappear, they roll on, administered by specialist solicitors, often tucked away in the venerable legal chambers of Lincoln's Inn. These legal and financial scaffolding ensure continuity and privacy, making the true ownership and influence incredibly difficult to trace for the casual observer. You won't find a Rothschild quarter signposted on a street corner, nor will you stumble upon a Sassoon Square. Yet, if you were to count the leasehold titles across London, you'd find that the streets and properties they influenced far outnumber those named after monarchs, perhaps by a ratio of 3-to-1. The hiddenness, therefore, isn't sinister in the sense of some grand, shadowy conspiracy. Rather, it's bureaucratic. It's the byproduct of highly sophisticated, long-term financial planning designed for maximum efficiency, generational continuity, and yes, brilliant tax efficiency. It's a testament to their mastery of not just finance and property, but also the legal and administrative frameworks that govern wealth. What London owes. The sheer scale of London's population growth between 1800 and 1950, quadrupling in size, is almost unfathomable. This explosion wasn't just a demographic phenomenon. It was a logistical and infrastructural challenge of immense proportions. How do you house so many people? The answer is simple, yet profound. Someone had to finance the roofs over their heads. And in countless instances, that someone was Jewish capital. This capital wasn't just about building, it was about absorbing shocks, stepping into the breach when public funds were either insufficient or simply couldn't reach. Think about the successive waves of hardship and migration that London experienced, the influx of Irish immigrants fleeing famine, the desperate arrival of pogrom refugees from Eastern Europe, the widespread homelessness left by the Blitz, and the later waves of post-colonial arrivals. Each of these crises presented an immense social and housing challenge. Jewish capital, through its various forms, from the Rothschilds' industrial dwellings to the East End Providence societies, provided a rental market that, however imperfect or basic it might have sometimes been, crucially prevented widespread slum epidemics and utter destitution. It offered a vital safety valve. And even when the Greater London Council, in its zeal for modernist urban planning, demolished vast swaths of traditional terrace streets to make way for brutalist estates, it was often housing associations rooted in these very Jewish charities that stepped in to provide essential relocation allowances and support for displaced families. They eased transitions, offering a human touch in periods of stark, often impersonal urban renewal. Even gentrification, that much-lamented force of modern urban change, rides on the back of those 99-year leases, the very legal instruments first meticulously drafted in the immaculate copperplate handwriting of Rothschild clerks. The enduring legal frameworks established centuries ago continue to shape property ownership and development today. London's modern identity, polyglot, adaptive, relentlessly obsessed with property value, a true global city, mirrors in many profound ways the commercial worldview that these pioneering families carried out of the cramped Frankfurt ghetto and the bustling Baghdad bazaar. They brought with them a deep understanding of trade, finance, and the enduring value of tangible assets, a worldview that proved perfectly suited to shaping a global metropolis. Their legacy isn't just in the buildings, it's in the very economic and social DNA of the city.